Hi everyone, my name is Mispa. Welcome back to another video. So I'm in my greenhouse and I will show you how my tomato plants are getting on. I'll reverse the camera so you'll be able to see those. And also I'm growing cucumbers now in fabric bags. So I've just acquired some fabric bags and they're supposed to be better than terracotta plant pots because they're breathable, so it lets the roots aerate, and apparently it's better for growing plants that way. So I'll see how I get on with these new fabric bags. So I'll reverse the camera so you can see the tomato plants. So you can see that they're doing really well. I've got some in terracotta pots and some in the fabric bags so we can compare. And there are small yellow flowers appearing on them. So I'll just go give you a close-up over there. And I've put canes in to support them. So this week I visited Bodnant Garden in North Wales. It's near Conway, and they are stunning gardens set in the Welsh hills. There's something spectacular at all times of the year, but I went this week because I wanted to see their famous Laburnum Arch in full bloom, looking its best. It blooms for about 2 to 3 weeks at the end of May and the beginning of June. And it's so popular that you have to book a slot, you have to book tickets to visit it. And I managed to get a slot this week and I visited it and it really looked magical. So I'm happy to share that with you. Hope you enjoy seeing that. And then there's a book review of one of my favourite books, and I'll see you next week. Thank you for watching. Bye. So now I'm going to talk about this week's book, which is Rebecca by Daphne Du Maurier. It was published in 1938 and it's a story of 2 women and 1 man and a large country house called Mandalay. And Mandalay is based on a house that Daphne Du Maurier lived in herself in Cornwall. The story begins with a very famous opening line: "Last night I dreamt I went to Mandalay again." And the narrator, who is this female and she has no name, tells us about her dream where she's going along a long winding road and there are very large trees, and these trees are so overgrown and so wild that they are suffocating all the other shrubs along the way. And they're actually taking over the house. And by the time she reaches the house and then she looks at it, she realizes that it's in ruins. And at that point, she wakes up. And then she starts telling us her story, and she begins at the end. So the end of the story is that she is married to Max de Winter. He was the owner of Mandalay, but they don't live there anymore. They live abroad now, and they are living in hotel rooms, and they have this very dull, monotonous existence. They are almost living like a very elderly retired couple. But then we learn that she's only 30 years old. And she goes back to the beginning of her story of how she met Max. It has a Cinderella-like feel. So she was all alone in the world, and she was working as a companion for a really horrible woman. And Max came along, and after a very brief romance, he rescues her. So she marries him, and then she goes with him to be mistress of Mandalay. And Max had a previous wife, Rebecca, who has died. When our heroine, whose name we never learn, when she reaches Mandalay, she's so insecure and so inexperienced that she's totally out of her depth. She meets the housekeeper, Mrs. Danvers, and Mrs. Danvers was besotted with the first Mrs. De Winter, Rebecca, and she sets out to undermine the new wife. And the new wife also finds that her husband, Max, he's quite brooding, he's quiet, he doesn't spend much time with her, he doesn't talk to her, and she feels very unhappy in her marriage. She thinks her marriage is a failure, and she thinks that Rebecca would have been the perfect wife, and she could do everything so much better. And she thinks that her husband is still in love with Rebecca. She sees Rebecca, even though she's dead, she sees her as her rival and becomes obsessed with her. And she's almost haunted by her because Mrs. Danvers runs the house exactly how it would have been run by Rebecca. And Rebecca died in these mysterious circumstances, and so no one really talks about her. And the story has a Gothic sort of menacing atmosphere. I'll read a few lines just to show you how our narrator is obsessed with the first wife, Rebecca. Her footsteps sounded in the corridors. Her scent lingered on the stairs. The servants obeyed her orders still. The food we ate was the food she liked. Her favourite flowers filled the rooms. Her clothes were in the wardrobes in her room. Her brushes were on the table. Her shoes beneath the chair. Her nightdress on her bed. Rebecca was mistress of Mandalay. Rebecca was still Mrs. De Winter. And then later on she says, wherever I walked in Mandalay, wherever I sat, even in my thoughts and in my dreams, I met Rebecca. I knew her figure now, the long, slim legs, the small and narrow feet, her shoulders broader than mine, the capable, clever hands, hands that could steer a boat, could hold a horse, hands that arranged flowers, made the models of ships, and wrote Max from Rebecca on the flyleaf of a book. I knew her face too, small and oval, the clear white skin, the cloud of dark hair. I knew the scent she wore. I could guess her laughter and her smile. If I heard it, even among 1,000 others, I should recognise her voice. Rebecca, always Rebecca. I should never be rid of Rebecca. So she feels haunted by Rebecca, and there is a twist at the end, and I won't spoil the ending for you, but when we finish the novel, we actually forget the quiet, mouse-like, nondescript second Mrs. De Winter, and it is the memory of Rebecca that stays with us, and we're haunted by her because she's such a fascinating character. The other thing that I really love, the writing is wonderful, and you really feel as if you're in the house. The descriptions of the house are very intense, and the gardens and the grounds. And I also love how the flowers and the plants and the trees are actually symbolic. So Rebecca planted these blood red rhododendron, and she planted white azaleas, and her scent was azaleas. So they are everywhere. They are all around the grounds, and they are in the house as well. And so there's this overpowering presence of the rhododendron. And then the new Mrs. De Winter, her bedroom overlooks the rose garden. And you can imagine the tranquility and the very peaceful atmosphere in the rose garden, and that is supposed to be her flowers and symbolic of her. I love the writing. I love the story. There are twists, and it's full of suspense. So a really enjoyable read. So Rebecca by Daphne Du Maurier.